Hi, I'm here to visit with you today about what I call heart-centered leadership, or what might be more commonly known as servant leadership. Servant leadership came into my awareness about 15, 16 years ago through the teachings of Ken Blanchard. And you can reach out and look on YouTube. There's many videos by Ken Blanchard on his concept of servant leadership. As I have lived and practiced this method of leadership in business, in my home space, in other groups outside of work, I've come to love this way of leading people. There's a common discussion about what's the difference between leadership and management and which one is more important. And I'm here to tell you that they are both important. Leadership is significant in moving people forward, whether it's a family or an organization, in a joyful, fun, flowing, effective manner. Management is all about the skill of getting things done. And so in any space, there has to be this balance between the doing and the being. And that is really what is at the essence of servant leadership. It's this balance of, yes, we have to have some doing to get things done, but the way that we are being in the process of getting that done makes a significant difference. You can see that in different leadership examples throughout history of countries where you have a country who's ran strictly by an authoritarian style of government, where they are telling people how to do things, versus a more democratic style of government where people are coming together to figure out how to do things. So at the extreme of the leadership perspectives, you would have authoritarian leadership, and at the other extreme would be laissez-faire leadership, where there's really no guidance, no direction. Everybody's just kind of doing their own thing and fending for themselves. And I'm sure if you've worked, lived, or existed in this world for any length of time, you've probably come across people that had both styles of leadership. Now, I call it leadership, but it's more, that isn't the great term, as those styles are not effective forms of leading people. So when we come into the center, the authoritarian is this very structured way of doing things, of taking orders, of control. Laissez-faire is this very open-ended, flexible way of doing things. If we can bring them into the center, where we have a balance of essentially the masculine and the feminine, we come up with what I define as heart-centered leadership. And heart-centered leadership at its core has the value of the people that it leads as its top priority. So any leader of an organization, when he or she values their self more highly than the people who are actually on the front lines doing the work, that's when our priorities get out of balance. So heart-centered leadership always keeps in mind what is in the highest good of our people. So what's in the highest good of the people working for this company? What's in the highest good of this family? What's in the highest good of this volunteer organization? So how does that show up in the leader's leadership style? Well, the leader is there to cast a vision for the organization. They're tasked with making some things happen, especially in the work world. A leader is there to accomplish some goals. Now, how they accomplish those goals is going to be a mix of management and leadership, just as we always have to actually have some action of doing things to move forward. Leadership is more about how that action unfolds than whether it unfolds or not. So let's take a look at this. The leadership practices, or there's 5 leadership practices that support servant leadership. The first one is model the way. So at the core of this, the leader of the organization is always modeling what they want their people to exemplify. So whether you are the head of a family, the head of an organization, or the head of a nonprofit or volunteer organization, you're using your own behavior to check what's happening in your organization. So modeling the way means taking 100% responsibility for the state of that organization. And if it's not running according to how you want it to, then checking in with yourself and seeing, how is that reflecting something in me? How is it reflecting a lesson I need to learn? How is it reflecting an area, a blind spot that I might have that might need to be shifted in order to grow this organization to the next level? The level of an organization always depends on the level of the leadership skills of the leader. Always. And so the only way to continually grow an organization is for the leader themselves to continually grow and role model that. So the number 2 principle is inspire a shared vision. So the leader is there to chart the course of where this organization is going. Again, I'm going to use the term organization, but that could be applied to your family, your nonprofit, your volunteer organization, whatever it is, the principles apply the same. But the leader holds the vision, and they are there to cast that vision and inspire the people to get on board with why they're going in the direction that they're going. So that might look at, the shared goals, the time frame to accomplish them in. If there's new things they've got to learn to do that, the leader is inspiring them forward in a flexible manner. So what that means is the leader is always responsible for casting the vision of the destination of where that's headed. They're always the one at the helm steering the ship. But they are open and flexible about how they accomplish getting there. And that is seen in the 3rd principle of challenge the process. So the leader casts the vision. And here's something important to know. If you cast your vision at this level, the people around you get that vision at this level. And it's important that you continually cast that vision. It is common knowledge that it takes 7 positives to outweigh 1 negative. So when you think about that in terms of casting a vision, it really takes someone hearing the exact same thing 7 to 10 times in a short time frame to really get that vision out there. Now, many times a leader can say, well, I shared my vision with the organization, or they're here, they know what the vision is, they know what our goals are, but that's not enough. You have to continually remind and re-inspire. Otherwise, what happens is dilution, and people all of a sudden get their focus going in different directions. The minute that you quit casting that vision, their attention diverts and goes to their own thing that they're interested in. So as you continue to cast that vision, then you're going to be flexible about how that vision is accomplished. And that's in number 3, challenging the process. So challenging the process always looks like, how are we getting there? And that is where it's super powerful to use the combination of the skills of the people on your team, in your family, to figure out how to get this goal accomplished. Now, here's what I know about inspiring the participation of the people around you. You are never as good as you can be with, okay, I don't think I'm saying that correctly, but your solo efforts will never be as good as the combined efforts of a team that's inspired and engaged and heading in the right direction. So when you cast that vision, then it's super important to allow space for creativity and flexibility, and to challenge the processes of how you're going to get there. And let the team members come up with those creative processes with you. This is also important because they buy into that. So we're going to talk about language of a culture when we get through these 5 things, because that's super important, and language comes in a lot here. When you are inspiring people to contribute it creates a shared vision. So now it doesn't just become your vision, it also becomes the shared vision of the team. And they get buy-in and they're invested in accomplishing that goal. So number 4 is enable others to act. So it is always the leader of an organization's role to provide the tools, strategies necessary for the people within the organization to accomplish what they need to accomplish. It can be as simple as giving them permission to access information they need, or it might be as complex as allowing someone who has a great capacity to lead in a certain area to take over that aspect of a team. You're empowering them to do that. And always remembering that as the leader sets the level and the tone for the organization, as they grow their leadership capacity, it's super important in enabling others to grow that leadership capacity of your key people. So your key people need to be growing and expanding with you to maximize the potential of that organization. And then number 5 is encourage the heart. Just like people quickly lose sight of the vision, they also quickly get discouraged. So it's constantly having key conversations about what they're doing, how it applies, and why it's important to the outcome of the organization. And that is important from the very smallest, most unimportant job in the organization to the most important job in the organization. It's always important that each person understand how their actions help to foster the ultimate outcome and vision. Now, having those key conversations is super important. And here's where I think there is a misunderstanding between this idea of management and leadership. I know in my own experiences, many people perceive the idea of heart-centered or servant leadership as a passive form of leading people where you were not holding people accountable. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Servant heart-centered leadership is all about having this strong, firm presence that also holds accountability in a soft way. There's nothing about it that's weak. There's nothing about it that is getting trampled over or that is allowing other people to take advantage. But there's everything about it is leading from this soft yet very firm space. So what's important about that is the leader is clearly defining the expectations. And when those expectations are exceeded, it's important to be recognized. And when those expectations are not met, it is also important to be recognized. And they're always keeping in mind that number one value of serving others. So if expectations are not being met, what's the damage that's having to the greater organization? If one person isn't fulfilling their end of the commitment or keeping up their pace, is that pulling the rest of the team down to their level? So instead, can we find a way to pull that person up to the rest of the level of the team? And that's where we have these key conversations. And key conversations look like this. I'm going to go over this because I think it's very, very super important. Key conversations first are clarifying expectations. Even when you think the person should already know the expectations, we're not mind readers. So we have to have clarifying conversations. And a clarifying conversation looks like, hey, Emily, let's have a conversation to make sure that we're on the same page about what your role is here and what you're working to accomplish in the next 30 days. You know, this is the vision we've cast and where we're going. And this is the expectations that I see as part of that role that you're playing. And then you would list the two or, the key expectations. And then you would check in with Emily and say, is that how you see your expectations? And you get commitment, a verbal commitment. Yes, it is, or no, it isn't. And if there's any ambiguity in there, then you can clarify that. So you leave that conversation with very, very clear expectations. Now, what happens? Emily either rises up to those expectations or she doesn't. And if she doesn't, you don't ignore it. Ignoring is being passive. And this isn't about a passive form of leadership. It's about a soft but firm form of leadership. So a follow-up conversation would be, hey, Emily, last week we agreed that your expectations were 1, 2, 3. Correct? Right? We agreed on that? Emily's going to say, yeah, we agreed on that. And then you're going to follow that up by saying, well, I observed this last week that you didn't meet the expectations in category 1 and 2. Can you tell me what happened? So you're going to ask for Emily's feedback. Say, what was going on? And Emily might say, you know what? I was not feeling good last week and I was off my game. And I totally know I didn't, hold up my end of the bargain, and I'm going to do better next week. Or Emily might say, you know what? I am missing a key component of information that I need to make this happen. Or Emily might say, oh, I didn't know I didn't meet those. Wide range. It doesn't really matter what Emily says. It's your opportunity to re-clarify those expectations. So now you can say, okay, so what do you need from me so that we can very clearly and firmly meet these expectations in the future in a designated amount of time? And you get Emily's feedback again, and you get the commitment. Say, okay, Emily, so is there any reason now with this, from the result of this discussion, that you can't meet this expectation? And Emily's going to say, no, I've got it. I'm on it. And then you say, great, awesome, high five. We're on the same page. We know what's happening. Now, long term, if Emily continues to fail to meet expectations, then you have to define some consequences. Say, hey, Emily, we had a conversation last week where, you didn't meet the expectation. And I noticed again this week you did not either. So we need to talk about that again. And we need to talk about also what's going to happen if you fail to meet that expectation moving forward. And make it very clear what the consequence is going to be if they fail to meet that expectation moving forward. Now, Emily's got a choice. She either rises up to the level of everyone else on the team, or she chooses, maybe this isn't the space, the team for her to be on. Maybe you realize that Emily is a rock star in something, but it's not the role that she's playing in this organization. And then you get the opportunity to evaluate whether she needs a shift in roles or what needs to happen. Now, that same conversation can be had in the encouraging the heart format. When Emily knocks it out of the ballpark and does fantastic, it's just as important to recognize that. Even more important, as we discovered, 7 positives to offset a negative. So when Emily does something awesome, you're right there as a leader saying, you know what, Emily, I saw what you did with that customer over there. And it was really awesome. You put that customer's needs and priorities above everything else, and you help them find a solution. And I really appreciate that. What gave you the courage to do that? And again, you ask and get insight from Emily on what is helping her to succeed. And then I'm a big fan of sharing successes with the entire team, because that inspires other people to continue to rise up to this level of expectation. Now, I wanted to also finish up here with some information on the language of culture. And in the notes of this, I'm going to link also an article that talks about how to use creative evolutionary language. Because very few people realize how the language we use inspires or indicates the outcome that we're going to get. So if I ask you what is called a closed-ended question, yes or no. If I ask you a question, the only 2 answers are yes or no, that shuts thinking down. So if I ask Emily, did you get that report done on time? Yes, I did, or no, I didn't. That's a question that centers the actual firing of the brain in the midbrain, and it doesn't inspire creativity. An open-ended question like, hey, Emily, tell me how that report wrapped up. Now Emily has to actually share some information, and that actually gets the prefrontal cortex area of the brain firing, and is going to generate a much more creative, engaging response. Now, when we use language that invites positive expectation and curiosity, that also centers people on this prefrontal cortex. The mid part of our brain is used for taking orders and for kind of our survival, the things that we do that when we're in kind of survival mode. But the prefrontal cortex of our brain is where all of our creativity and possibilities lie. So there could be times when you really need people just to take orders. That might be in a crisis mode situation. If there is, some sort of a crisis going on and you need to say, hey, Emily, I need you to do XYZ right now. Jack, I need you to do ABC right now. And you need them to do that without questioning. That's giving a direct order or direct command Nothing wrong with that in the appropriate circumstance when you need people really to just engage, and especially in an emergency situation. When I think about in my own experiences in the industry that I came from was the environmental waste industry, and if there was an accident, any safety violation in process, that was the moments in time where it, if I saw someone in the middle of an action that was going to jeopardize their safety or someone else's, it's very important that if I said, hey, stop and back out from underneath that piece of equipment, very important that they listened and did that right now. Then the conversation after that would have been, hey, do you know what was going on in that moment? Did you know that thing was about to fall on you and crush you? So there are moments when we need to use these kind of direct forms or commands, but that is not in everyday life. In everyday life, we want to inspire creativity. We want to get everybody's participation, and we want the highest outcome possible of everybody buying in and participating. So that's when it's important that we use positive language that triggers this prefrontal cortex and casts a vision of what you want them to see. Another example from my time in the waste industry, because it's highly safety oriented, was also around how many days did the team go safe. Many people referred to this as their accident-free days. But when I say accident-free to you, what's the very first image that pops in your brain? I'm presuming it's going to be of an accident of some type. And that's not the image. When I sent my people out at the beginning of the day, I did not want to be sending them out with the image of an accident in their head, because the likelihood of them having an accident statistically increases significantly if they had an image of an accident in their head. So instead, I evoked language that inspired them to see safe practices. How many safe days have we had? What behavior are you going to do today to inspire the safety of others? So it's so key when we use to learn this language to set the tone for the culture. And it really can be the significance between a very uplifting culture where people want to work and a very negative culture where people don't want to work. And to bring it back to our families, when we're using inspiring language, you can give a direct order for your child to take out the trash, or you can use more inspiring language like, Johnny, I really need you to help keep this house clean so that we have this fun, awesome space to exist in. And think about how you are helping us to have this nice space by doing us a favor and taking the trash out. And how awesome that you can do that by 4 o'clock today. Okay? So we're asking. Now, if I was giving that conversation with Johnny, I would also follow up by saying, you know what? Is there any reason you can't do it by 4 o'clock today? And Johnny might say, well, I have football practice right now and I'm headed out the door and I won't be home till 6 o'clock. And then you can say, okay, so can you do it at 6 o'clock? Yeah, I can do it at 6 o'clock when I get home. So we're always checking in. We're always using curiosity and questioning language to get people to buy in and to move forward. So we've covered a lot of things in this video around heart-centered leadership. We've looked at how, as a leader, you can model the way, you can inspire a shared vision, you can challenge the process, you can enable others to act, and you can encourage the heart. And then we also looked at how you can have effective conversations that are not passive in any way, shape, or form, but yet they are full of respect and compassion and value for the other person. And then we looked at how you can use language to really set the culture and the stage for the people around you. So I hope you have learned something about the heart-centered leadership process today, and I'd love for you to leave a comment below on this video, a comment or question. Love to have any. So have a great day.